All right, we are live with the weekly SKTLs Volunteer / Community Crypto Call. We have all of our weekly all-stars here. We got Joe, Dan,
Cabana, get your microphone closer. We can't. It's all wind.
Joe, Dan, Joe, Sanazzi. Sorry, I'm trying to block the wind as I do this, but yeah, let's get the show started, boys.
First of all, Cabana and Joe are on the beach, and the rest of us have like Federal Reserve Day and shit. Like, this is complete what are we doing, Bryce? What are we doing with our life? We have nothing figured out over here.
I think Cabana and I need to hook up this week sometime.
Are you guys like literally 10 miles away from each other or something?
Close, yeah. It's about a 35-minute drive down the coast.
Yeah, I'm not trying to speak for you guys, but you guys should have a beer at least together or something.
Probably should.
You'll be the first SKTL volunteers to meet in person.
The first SKTLs meetup.
We might have to meet down this way every year then.
Let's do that.
I'm all for having
a yearly event. There we go.
Let's do this, and we should do it in March every year, like 6 weeks. Are you drinking something alcoholic too? My God, this guy has got it figured out. Bryce, we are working for a living. Unbelievable.
Jeez, I should have grabbed one.
It's just lime. That's all. That's all it is. Just lime juice.
Yeah.
So
Bud Light lime juice.
We'll hit markets real quick let me get this better angle here. We'll hit markets real quick since, we just had some crazy volatility this afternoon. If you guys pay attention at all, you saw Powell came out with his announcement and they were like, here's what everybody expected. We'll raise by 25 basis points and we will say these words. And he said the words in those press releases. Then we ran home for lunch to eat some turkey sandwich while we didn't drink beer and have pizza, bro. We were over there drinking Perrier and eating turkey sandwiches because one of us around here had a heart attack recently, so we don't get to go drinking willy-nilly like we used to. Anyway, Powell started talking. Bryce was like sitting there with our sandwiches, and he put on, I wouldn't have been listening, but Bryce was like, let's listen. So we sat there and we're listening, and the questions are like, hey, Powell, what do you think about when you said that in the future you might firm rates? And Powell's like, I wouldn't pay attention to the word firm. I'd pay attention to the word maybe or some shit like that. And I was like, oh, my God, dude, this market's going to tank. Oh, Bryce, do you hear him? And then they said, do you think the banking crisis is over? And he's like, yes, it's over. Things are fine. The banking system is completely healthy. And just 3 days ago, we put together a bunch of emergency packages, drastic measures to save it. So it's healthy, but we just drastically saved it. So I am not surprised. And if you read Trading with Cody, that I think most of the volunteers do. I don't know about the people watching, but if you read Trading with Cody, what I mentioned yesterday was first reaction will probably be up, and then we'll be back to path of least resistance being downward, which I think it basically has been during this bear market for the last year or so. And it wasn't path of least resistance. It was more like sledding off a bobsled starting point, something. That was not I blew that. Anyway, it was ugly out there. Our adrenaline is flowing because we had a bunch of shorts and puts and hedges on in the hedge fund. And then in the last 10 minutes, we were like, sell those puts, cover that. Bryce, hurry, buy a Tesla call quickly as you can. We got 8 seconds before the close. And we were doing that until we started this call. Very exciting / terrifying day, depending on where you are. Like my personal account, I'm sure is demolished ugly today. It's going to be down like 7 or 8%, I bet. But, that's part of the personal account versus the hedge account. You hedge in the hedge fund, and in the personal account, you ride. So any other questions or comments on the markets? And then we'll go to space.
Start breathing. You're going to have another.
Truth be told, somewhere around on this desk, I actually have nitroglycerin pills.
Jeez.
like my wife sent them to after I had my heart attack. She sent me to the office. The doctor gave me nitroglycerin pills in case I have another heart attack at some point. And literally right here on the desk, right there. Those are my nitroglycerin pills. So I'm not going to take any right now. Lipitor is in there too. I mean, I'll take a Lipitor.
Don't mistake those. Yeah.
Market and pharmaceutical updates only here.
That's right.
SKTLs
Right.
volunteers.
got
Street.
Lipitor.
Welcome to
Buy
Skitle's call.
Pfizer.
Here's what's going on. Oh,
Buy
that's funny.
Pfizer. He's using Lipitor. Buy Pfizer.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Dan Geraci. Look, by the way, last thing here, before Cabana shows up on a beach with no battery, we were going to do a call today where I was going to show you guys how you can buy the token and how I would find my tokens in my MetaMask. But I'm calling with Cabana gone, I don't want halfway through the call for me to be explaining something and we lose it. And so it's cool. We're not doing that today. We'll do it next Wednesday.
I'll have more access to the buttons next week, so it should be way better. Yeah,
you won't be on a beach.
Correct. Sadly,
maybe this guy goes on. It seems like half the time that I talk to Cabana, he's on a beach somewhere or down in like Arkansas hunting or something.
Look at the beach. I'd be on the beach every day too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a brand.
He doesn't live by the beach, Dan. He lives in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
All right, Dan. Can we talk space? I'd love to hear some updates. We had Virgin Orbit declare bankruptcy almost, and then 24 hours, they're like, no, really, we've got $200 million coming VC. I don't believe any of it. Seems not very crazy to me, but what's the update in space this week?
Well, I think there's all the financial stuff. It's a mugs game, frankly, with some of these companies, and I think with the banking issue, and more importantly with Virgin, they're trying to keep it from hitting the floor completely. But at the end of the day, they still need a plan for the business. Saving it is one thing, finding more capital is one thing, but I'm going to be curious to see it, if it does in fact all come together for them, what's going to be different. Because they got into this position because they weren't able to drive enough revenue. They know how to spend money, which is the case with most companies in this industry. So we'll see. The bigger thing from our perspective, is the fact that Orbital Prime, the big program that SpaceWorks has that they started a year and change ago for debris removal, today announced, or yesterday, the 30 companies out of the 96 or so that had won the first phase SBIR awards, the grants that were like 150 grand. 30 companies now have won the phase 2. It's called direct to phase 2, D2P2, as they say, where they immediately jump into these companies that jump into phase 2 level, which is a $1.7 million grant for their technology. And there were 30 companies announced today, and some are known to people here. We've talked about Cislunar Industries before. They're one of those beneficiaries, a very young company. And so what this is doing is it's taking other companies that have better technology, or more developed, I should say, technology, and moving them at a faster pace with bigger money. Again, keeping in mind that even so, they're a year or more away from deploying that technology in a commercial way where they're going to get some revenue. But it's at least a sign that the process is working. It's not doing anything for what the needs of the country are from a space perspective today. And that continues to be an area of focus, and it continues to be an area of a lot of investment by the government in terms of grant money to try to find technologies that we can put to work immediately. And you know, there's a lot of saber rattling, as everybody knows, going on geopolitically amongst ourselves and the Chinese and the Russians, and you know, and where space is concerned, that won't include North Korea in that. But you know, there's a lot of risk for the space industry because of the military side of it. So that's going to continue to be the case. I think it's going to be, you know, almost like it was when we had the first Cold War, as opposed to the one that we might be in right now. And I think that's the, it's going to be a matter of who can establish superiority and be willing to come out and prove that they have superiority in space. Right now, everybody's talking about having it, but we don't have that clear definition of what superiority looks like right now. And I think that's frankly because no one clearly is far and away ahead of anybody else. We hear that the Chinese are ahead of us, but you know, we heard that about the Russians a long time ago with regard to a lot of things, and then found out that we had overestimated their capabilities for 20 or 30 years. So we don't know. But,
you know, Dan, a couple comments on that. Number one, that China doesn't have SpaceX, and I mean, far and away, like SpaceX is better than NASA at doing stuff, getting stuff back and forth to space, including people.
China has China. They have the CCP. They don't need to worry about contracts. They don't need to worry about bureaucracy. They don't need to worry about time to market. That's their advantage. They want to do something, the money goes directly to it, they build it, and they put it up there.
Yeah, but history shows, though, including your example about Russia prior in the 80s, when we found out how far behind they were, that there is something to be said. You know, the good example is how New York City every day, without essentially any central control, somehow feeds 10 million people at lunch. Every day, the logistics of supply and demand work out, and 10 million people eat a sandwich or soup or sushi. And if you centrally controlled that, everybody's going to eat rice and dislike it, and half the people aren't going to get the food.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, our advantage is the free enterprise system and the ability to go out. You know, capitalism is our big advantage, and the entrepreneurial nature of our economy, and that's what we have. We have those young engineers out there on their own creating companies and creating technologies. And, you know, people in the military will tell you that's our major advantage. It's a disadvantage for China. But the advantage for China that's a disadvantage for us is the bureaucracy of getting from point A to point B. And that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. In a long process, we should win. The only issue is, you know, not everyone plays by the same rules. And so if you can steal technology, then you don't have to develop it. You can get there a lot faster. You know, we all know about the Russian Buran.
Are we talking about Microsoft still?
They're going to be the shuttle. Yeah, that looks strangely like ours. Of course, NASA published the plans for the shuttle online. That might be why. So yeah, it's the new space economy, I believe, as we talked about a week or so ago, is going to have another robust year of capital raising. I'm convinced of that. I think the last half of this year, I would expect to see a fair bit more momentum. Certain types of investors are on the sidelines, but you know, that's more of their nature, personally speaking, than it is the nature of the industry that we're talking about. And I think that, you know, I talked to a couple of companies today that are doing raises, and we're seeing now the venture arms of major mutual fund companies stepping into space, which means institutionally, they've said, we like these space companies. We'll get our feet wet with our private money, our venture capital side. And then as these companies go public, we'll be learning from that. And then we'll look to put some of these space companies in mutual funds, in ETFs, especially, et cetera. So that background trend is there. And once they commit and they start writing big checks, they've done their homework. They know they're early, but I think that trend is going to continue. We just need more companies going public that don't, blow up 20 minutes later.
I mean, there are repercussions in the marketplace, in the private marketplace, that because so many shitty space companies were the first ones to come public through the SPACs. And I've been telling, again, my subscribers for 2 years, and don't get me wrong, we lost some money in some of these companies, including Rocket Lab. I still own it, but it's the only one I own. And I've been saying for a long time that the best startup space companies are still private, except for Rocket Lab. And my gosh, the marketplace has sniffed that out and demolished these companies. And then the other problem, of course, is that it's not just that some of them were shitty. Some of them were good. Black Sky, I think, is a good company. Planet's probably a good company. But Rocket Lab is another one that the reason the stock's down 60% from where it came public is not because it's a bad company or not because the fundamentals haven't followed, but they are going to need access to capital at some point, even though they're already public. And with this market, the financial capital markets shutting down, supplying startups with free money, there's real impact and there's threat. At some point, we're probably going to get diluted as shareholders of Rocket Lab if and when they raise money anywhere near these levels. You're going to need a miracle for the stock to double so they can raise money at a decent valuation somewhere soon. Not soon, but what was it? We saw like in the next 18 months to 2 years, they're going to need to raise money. They've got enough for 3 years, but they'll need to raise money before they run out.
Well, public companies, depending on how much of their stock they floated and how much access to more capital in the public market they're going to have, what we're probably going to be seeing at some point is going to be using debt as a way to raise capital.
And the debt is not 18 months ago, debt was 0 to 5%. Now it's 10 to 15%.
And so exactly. And so the extent to which they're going to have to do that or they choose to do that, it will be low rated debt. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah.
This is going to be, I think the good ones will be in the C's, but you may have some junk rated,
Did you see
debt.
Tesla? Did you see Tesla's debt? Tesla's debt got upgraded on Monday from one of the ratings agencies from junk to BA AA plus to something.
So I think the industry is just going to have to plod along. Personally, I wouldn't want to be public for a long time in this environment, and frankly, not just for space, but I think the big private equity companies will tell you, like the KKRs of the world, more companies stay private or sell to a strategic buyer than go public now. Going public is the least preferred route because they have the least amount of control over their ability to invest and reinvest and take their time to execute a strategy. When you go public, you live on a 90-day life cycle.
Do you know 2 points on that? You guys all remember, at least some of you guys remember Margarita, who was one of our co-founding volunteers. Sanatsi, you would remember her. We spent a lot of time she helped us tremendously with developing our white paper and everything else. Her husband is a hedge fund guy, and he talks a short selling hedge fund. And he talks about how it's like 60 or 70% of all the publicly traded companies go to zero every 5 or 10 years. I'm messing up the numbers, but it's a mind-blowing number of companies that are public that end up going to zero. And you can survive a lot longer in the private markets in some ways than you can in the public markets, because, as Bryce will tell you, his dad runs a giant construction company. And he the other day said to me, could you imagine if my dad every 90 days had to go to investors and like, here's what we did, and all the time he would waste and the energy he would waste. And the last 90 days, I talk to investors all day, every day on my Trading with Cody service and just in general. And I tell them all the time, that's like, certainly you can start to see trends after several quarters in a row, but 90 days is a snapshot in time that for any business can be meaningless in many ways. If you're going to argue with Elon Musk about the gross margins of Tesla over the last 90 days, he's going to hang up on you.
And space especially is a long-term investment. And this is why VCs are not a great match. And so it's a 10 to 15 year type of a growth cycle for a company, typically if they're starting out pretty new, as the new space industry is, writ large. And, having been there, when you're a part of a public company, you do your 90-day earnings report. You have your analyst call. For the next week, you're fielding a bunch of follow-up questions, but you've already started on the next quarterly earnings report. and you just go from one to the next to the next. It ties up the entire C-suite. Everybody's running forecasts and everything. Your business plan that you spent the last 4 months of the prior year putting together for this year is already out the window after one quarter, because now it needs to be recut. It needs to be a rolling 12-month forecast. It needs, and the time that gets spent is pathetic.
Let's move back to space for a moment, if we can. You mentioned earlier about China versus United States, and this will tie in directly to space debris. We've talked before about, and I was on Fox a couple of weeks and even mentioned this, that the risk benefit for Iran, much less China, to blow up some United States satellites and cause a space debris collisions and a greater space debris problem. It's like we need space more than they do. We're more reliant on the United States, and Europe itself are more reliant on space at this very moment and the capabilities of GPS and communications that it enables versus China, certainly even a smaller state. But in addition to that, China's got, hypersonic missiles that can get from a ship to the United States, for example, faster than any of our space technology could shoot it down. So while I was dismissive on Fox when I talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I thought about it afterward, and just because they can't send things back and forth to space as quickly as we can to build stuff doesn't mean that they don't have the capabilities to mess us up in bad ways, both on the ground and in space.
They do. And let's be clear. I mean, their reliance on space is in one very key area, and that's surveillance. Earth observation technology. And they spy on all their adversaries the way we do and the Russians do.
We spy.
And so big risk category in space. And now they have a space station, and they have other risks as well. No, they're not launching with the frequency, but I would expect them to catch up. And it's like going into a literal third world country that had no telecommunications infrastructure for decades and decades. And then what's their first infrastructure? It's wireless technology and cell phones. And they go from zero to the front of the line, whereas we're carrying a legacy infrastructure along for a long time. So
great point. Yeah.
That's the only real issue there, is that I think they have a lot to lose Sure, we do. We have a lot to lose because we're more technologically advanced as a society and more dependent.
They
But
go hand in hand. The more you advance your technology, the more you depend on it.
and they are catching up fast, thanks to their ability to build some and take what they can't build, frankly. And so they're very sophisticated. I wouldn't put it past them. I think the Russians had a harder time in the Cold War than the Chinese are having right now. They can throw a lot of people at any issue, and that's their advantage. They have the law of large numbers on their side.
The Russians literally could do that until about World War I, then into World War II, and they lost so many people in the Russo-Japanese Wars, World War I, and all of these other places that they ended up. I mean, how much? What you remember the numbers on how much was it? Like 30% of the population or something of Russia got wiped out in 20 years through war.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole communist economic model killed any innovation. We all knew that. They built the worst cars, they built the worst airplanes. It didn't work for them. I think what China's done is they've kept the parts of communism that they like, which is the government part. And ever since they got Hong Kong back, they've adopted capitalism as an economic engine.
Have they, though? As my 9-year-old daughter would say, Dan, have they, though? Have they really, though? Or is it some corrupt, bureaucratic, communist version of capitalism that's been completely bastardized and isn't going to work?
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing a lot of trade, but it's exactly what it is. There's no competition there.
Any other questions or comments? We've already run into 30 minutes on our call. Joe Anderson, you've got to say something from the beach. Cabana's probably battery died, and he's like chugging tequila with some college.
I am here.
Where are the college kids? You're in. It's like spring break in Miami with these people. What?
No, Miami is at the other end of Florida. I'm not dealing with that nonsense.
Dan, question for you about the graph that you posted. So looking at it, so these are the breakup of basically events that basically resulted in a lot of space debris. Am I understanding it correctly? And so, and if you look at the overall graph, you can see basically there's a slight decline in terms of basically
hold on, Sanatsi. Let me get the graph up for everyone. I'm grabbing it. Keep talking though. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so there is a decline, but so the not accidental but deliberate collisions. So these are. Can you think of it? I mean, or do you know if, some examples of deliberate really collisions?
I'm trying to share my screen. Cabana, can you enable screen sharing from my side?
I am looking for the button on mobile. Go ahead.
All right.
Deliberate explosions and deliberate collisions are really those well-reported, China blows up a satellite to test it, or Russia knocks out one of its own satellites with a surface weapon to try to show that they can hit the target, and they create 1,500 pieces of debris when they do it. A random collision, we've seen that where a country has smashed two of their dead satellites into each other or one into another. They're testing their ability to fight a little space conflict when they do that, to prove that they can do it and to send a message that they can do it.
I guess
what's amazing, do you guys see the screen, the chart up there now?
Yeah, no. I have an enlarged version open in another tab. So
all right, well,
I'm hoping that's okay.
It's on there. But if you guys will find it, I did paste the link in the chat right quick. And if you see the stuff, what Sanatzi's talking about is none of the, there's almost no accidental collisions in space. This stuff's all deliberate.
Yeah. The other thing that happens is countries will not properly report or follow the conventions, the international conventions for putting up satellites. And that's why we had this, lower stage, for example, which is also debris. It's not just satellites, right? This Chinese lower stage that re-entered the atmosphere and broke.
The Chinese just blew up one of our satellites and we lost Geraci.
Yeah.
So Nazi, was there another point you wanted to make with that?
Yeah, you can see, like, after 2002, I guess, or so, you can see the huge, to, I guess, support what Dan is saying, you can see the deliberate, basically, collisions a whole lot more. You see the big, brownish bubble, two big brownish bubbles. So, and the other thing is the link that I pasted, what's called Hummingbird. That's a tiny, GPS in a small satellite. And if you look at the link, actually, they point out how tiny the GPS actually is. In the hardware of that small, tiny satellite.
So, Nazi, we've talked about that before, right? That one of the most revolutionary parts of space at this point isn't just that launch costs keep coming down, but the amount of technology that you can put in a box this big gets more and more revolutionary too. And those satellites, the CubeSats themselves, used to be not that helpful, but now you could have HD imagery cameras inside of these things and lasers that communicate and geothermal measurement of sensors in a box this big. I just put the link of the Hummingbird thing in the chat on here too.
Yeah.
Were you go?
Yeah.
I interrupted again, I think. Sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Sorry about that. For some reason, I lost Wi-Fi and everything shut down. So.
You missed my joke. One of the satellites got blown up by the Chinese right at that moment, and then we lost Dan.
China.
They're outside my window now. They're after me.
China.
Yeah, and then there were those links I put in the chat, by the way, along with that chart that Sanasi mentioned, to go to NASA's orbital debris site, because you can get a lot of information there.
It's now in the chat on here also. These are good charts. I will repeat to everybody listening. Number one, if you have a great space debris cleaning solution idea, go submit it at SKTLs.com, our website. Right on the homepage, there is a button to click on that takes you to the page that you can fill out a very short, won't take you 5 minutes application to fill out, and the community of SKTLs will be voting on the recipients in the next 6 weeks. So go fill it out. Don't piddle around, as my wife would say, if you have a good idea. Number two, you can please join us on Slack. If Sanatsi, last week you posted a link to our Slack channel. If you'll do that again, that is the primary way that the volunteers of this it's not an organization, of this decentralized autonomous organization, I guess it is an organization, communicate. Community. The volunteer community. I like it. And the family. Come on, La Familia. I was listening to George Lopez the other day driving on the car, and he was saying something like, I was watching a movie and they literally translated the name of the movie from La Familia to The Family down at the bottom of the screen. What are we doing here? I was like, yeah, that seems extreme. So the word La Familia has been in my head lately. You guys, I have 2 song recommendations for you from an earlier conversation I had today. I lost my wallet in El Segundo. Please check it out. Tribe Called Quest, great song. Number 2, Ronnie Millsap. I'm going extreme eccentric on these two. Number 2 is Ronnie Millsap, Any Day Now. Somehow, I think Any Day Now is sort of like about the banks. Any day now.
I'm a
Banks
big fan of
are
Ronnie
gonna
Millsap.
crash. What do you
Ronnie
say, Cabana?
Millsap's my childhood. Love Ronnie Millsap.
Say, everybody who grew up anywhere rural and had any exposure to country music growing up is going to love. Even Bryce likes Ronnie Millsap. He didn't know he was blind. How do you not know?
There's
Ronnie
a
Millsap's blind?
stranger in my house.
Oh boy.
Sorry, we're going to start. We'll grab the guitar and let Cabana sing over the top as Bryce plays.
Cody, I pasted the Slack and also the Debrief Fund application links.
Thank you so much, Sanatsi. You know, like Sanatsi is like chief scientist for one of the most giant global companies in the world. And we've got him pasting links to our page on SKTLs. Like, that seems like below your pay grade, Sanatsi. And we appreciate you doing that, man.
Thank you. I'm retired, remember.
Yeah,
Three
but okay,
years ago,
retired
yeah.
chief scientist. Like, you're not just some retired schmo.
I'm active, correct. I'm still programming.
And finally, I'm going to leave you with the ironic song of one of my favorite artists of all time, Neil Young, and Keep on Rocking in the Free World, because I don't think he's quite meaning like, woohoo, the free world in America, we rock. But apropos our discussion of China versus the United States, I think Neil Young would agree. We're rocking in the free world over here. So you also can't play it on Spotify, of course, because Neil Young got mad at Joe Rogan and pulled his money off Spotify. E minor, C, D. E minor, C, D.
Cody, decaf.
Rock and roll. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. Same time, same bat channel.
Bye.
Hey, everybody.
Thank
Oh,
you.
boy. He's calling it close to it.
Uh-oh.
See you, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Back to the beach.